Hello, this is Ig Arthur, or E.G. Arthur if you prefer, and this video is specific to a particular instance and how the GenOut plugin may be able to provide a convenience for people who are running that instance. And the instance I'm talking about is called Thaurisgar. It's one of the new Return to Carndoom 3-man instances. It's also known as the Vile Apothecary. But before I get into talking about the instance and the plugin configuration, I just want to briefly explain the structure of this video. The first part, I'll be giving an overview of the instance and in particular the puzzle part of the instance. The second part will be just the standard process, just running through again the standard process for importing a use case for this particular instance, the new one that I've just published yesterday. And then part 3 is a demo of how you use that new use case to help solve the puzzle in the instance. And then I think those first 3 parts are more than enough for probably most people that just want to get this up and running. But part 4 will go into more of the customizations that you can do for this use case, for this alert. And that will be limited to the customizations that can be done through the GUI interface itself. And then lastly, part 5, I'll do more of a deep dive into the code, the Lua code that is underneath all of this, because unlike most of my use cases for GenOut, this one actually requires an extension which consists of some Lua code. So I just want to explain how it works, and so that if anybody wants to maybe improve it or extend it or use this technique for other plugins, etc., that they'll be able to do so. So here I am, part 1. Let's start part 1. Here I am in Thaurisgar, and it's kind of amusing, but as I was clearing out around these cauldrons, I got punted up by a troll, and I'm just floating in midair here. So I thought that was kind of funny. That makes for a good screenshot. Also, when you're like smashed up against a pillar like that, if you turn your camera on, notice how it shows like Mr. Baldy. Here you can see my ears and my bald head and so forth. So it's kind of weird. But anyhow, back to more serious matters. So the instance, I'll show the in-game map here. The part that it contains the puzzle is the bottom part here. And it's more or less oriented as an east-west. You enter at the upper level on the east, clear your way through to the west. There's a lever that you click on to open a door that gives you access to the lower level. Then you clear out the lower level, and eventually you get to the point up here. Well, actually, I can't go up to the door right now because I haven't cleared out everything. But ahead of me to the north is a door that's locked. And the solution for being able to unlock the doors is given in this note here, left behind by the alchemist or the apothecarist, whatever that term is. I'm not going to open the note and read it because part of the whole purpose of extending the plugin here is that you don't have to read that note. You can do this all without reading that note. But the gist of the note says that the door can be opened if you interact with these cauldrons in the correct order. And he gives 4 possible orders. Only one of them is correct, though. So you could end up wasting quite a bit of time running around and clicking on these cauldrons and getting them wrong. And it's kind of frustrating. I'm not really much of a fan of puzzles in MMOs. so this doesn't really appeal to me. But at the very end of the note, if you read carefully and get to the end, he says something about a clue as to the correct sequence can be gained by looking at the braziers that are over the doors. And the doors he's talking about are the doors to these side chambers. And let me put up the in-game map again. You see there's 4 different side chambers off the main hallway here. Northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. So if I head to the west side here, I see, and I look at the doors of the side chambers, which I'm realizing I actually didn't clear out, so I need to be careful. I see no braziers. If I go over to the east side, I see there's no brazier there, but there is a pallid green glowing brazier up on top of that door. For any given run of this instance, there will only be one brazier, and for any given location of a brazier, it will always be the same color. So this one here will always be green. This one here will always be red, and down the other end of the hall, one of them will be blue if it's present, and the other one will be yellow. All right, so in order to use the plugin to help with this instance, we would need to import the config, and I've actually unloaded all my plugins. So let me load the plugin. You need version 1.05 if you want full functionality here, because that contains the use case import file, and it also includes a bunch of image files. So once you have it loaded, go to GenOut setup, and I'm going to pretend here that I didn't already have this loaded. In fact, I'm going to delete it. So now that's not one of the alerts that I have loaded. If you already have some alerts loaded, and I got a whole bunch of them because I test this stuff, then you need to explicitly click on the one that says new. If you have no alerts loaded, then new will be the default. So you don't need to scroll and you don't need to click. It'll already be there. When new is selected, the import tab will be available. Click on the import tab, and then I'm going to go over to my file system and drill down into plugins, GArthur plugins, GenOut, imports, and I have a new directory here as of version 1.05 called Thaurisgar, and inside is a file called cauldrons.txt. Now, depending on how your Windows operating system is configured, it may associate .txt, that .txt extension, with a text editor. In my case, it's associated with Notepad. It may be associated with something else for you. But in Notepad, if I do a Control-A to select all of the text, a Control-C to copy that to my clipboard, then go back to the game, Control-V to paste it, then say save. Now I have a Thaurisgar alert. Note the checkboxes here to note that it's enabled and shared. Enabled, so it's ready to go, and shared, meaning that all of my characters on this account can use this particular alert. All right, so if I can remember which brazier, see the sickly green one over there, if I face towards the brazier and I issue the /LOC command, then you see it comes up on the right side here. It comes up with a graphic. The top part of the graphic is the color, which is just a confirmation that you're facing the right brazier. And then it gives the order of the cauldrons that I need to click. Now, bear in mind that the names that are associated with the cauldrons are somewhat shuffled. In fact, I think the Adder's Blood and Warg Slather are always in the back here, and the Stricken Seep and Scythe Spew are always in the front, but they can be on either side. I managed to confuse myself when I was first working on this, because at first I thought that they were always in the same position, and then I discovered otherwise. So given that order, I'll do Adder's Blood, Warg Slather, then on the other side, I want to do Scythe Spew, followed by Stricken Seep. And when you do that correctly, you see you get a message, a distant gate opens. The door to the apothecary has opened. And if you look down that hallway, which I haven't cleared yet, you'll see that the door is open. Also, since that's considered essentially a boss, you get a chest that you can open. All right, now, I do want to make it clear here that if you face the wrong doorway, you're going to get the wrong result. All right, I'll do a /LOC here. It's going to think that blue is the brazier that you've selected if you face towards the door where blue would be the location of the blue brazier. So this is essentially a case of garbage in and garbage out. If you deliberately mess things up by pointing to the wrong doorway, then you're going to get the wrong results. So you do need to take some care to point towards it. But as you saw earlier, from the cauldron area, you can see, you don't have to walk all the way up to the doorway to do that. Another tip that I'm going to give before I head into the customization from the GUI panel is if you look very closely here, I actually have a quick slot that's filled with an alias to /LOC. Now, when I hover over it, it says nothing. But that's because these things are overlapping each other. If I dismiss that image there, then you can see it more clearly. It says alias LOC. Now, you could put that in any quick slot that you want to, and you would use a command like this. Shortcut 60 specifies the last slot in quick slot bar number 4, and then you just give the command /LOC. So that overwrote that. If I were to remove it, then I could reestablish it just by issuing that same command. And now you have the convenience that it's just a single click in order to activate the plugin and come up with the cauldron clicking order. All right, so now let's talk about customization using the configuration utility. And you get to that the same way as when I did the import. At the command line, you say /GenOut /setup. And the things that you're most likely wanting to customize are going to be on this response tab. Make sure you have the Thaurisgar alert loaded. One thing you might want to customize is how long does that image stay up until it expires and disappears on its own. Now remember, you can dismiss the alert when you're done with it just by clicking on it. And we'll get to that in a moment. But if at a certain point, if you don't click on it, you do want it to go away, presumably. You don't want it to stay up infinitely. So this duration here is the number of seconds after which it will go away by itself. So you can set that to anything you want. Remember, anytime you change anything in these configuration panels, make sure to hit save. Another thing you might want to change is standard GenOut or alerter stuff. You can move this around. You can make it bigger. If I save that and now invoke it, you see now it's in a different position and it's somewhat larger. So you can control both the size and the position just by moving around that viewport. Some of these options don't apply because they only apply if you are using text, and we're not using text output, we're using an image. And let me briefly explain why I'm using an image, even though most of what you see on the image is actually text. And the reason for that is that I really, really, really wanted to have the color of the brazier displayed so that there would be a extra confirmation that you pointed towards the right brazier, right? Well, unfortunately, it's not possible currently in the plugin to only color part of a message output. So, and I don't want to color all of the text because some of the text might be hard to read if it's in a color, especially green. As you can see, this instance has a lot of green in it, and so green text might not work too well. Another thing you can't do currently within the plugin, although I'm trying to think of a way to implement this, is you can't select a different color based on your own custom Lua code or based on what pattern was matched. So that's another limitation. So it's always going to be blue, it's always going to be green, and obviously that's not what I want. I want it to be different colors. So for that reason, instead I had to resort to using an image, and so a lot of these things don't apply, like use scrolling text doesn't apply. One thing that does apply, though, is interval. If I set an interval, then that makes this flash every 2 seconds. I don't know why you do that. Personally, I think that's kind of annoying, but you could if you wanted to. But scrolling text won't work because that only applies to text, obviously. So the other thing that you might want to customize is the way that the alert gets dismissed. And within the GenOut framework, the way that you create a dismissible alert is you make the output area into a quick slot. Now, by default, because I can't really assume much about what the player has or doesn't have available, I have made the quick slot an emote, and the emote that I'm using is nothing. The reason I use the nothing emote is so that my character doesn't perform an animation when I dismiss the alert. Most emotes have an animation associated with them. However, if I switch over to one of my other general tabs, you'll see when I did that dismissal, I got some spam here that said, you do nothing, which I don't really like having spam in my chat log. That's a matter of personal taste, I guess. Another thing you could do is if you have an item in your inventory, you could set your quick slot type to item and drag that item over there. You'd want to pick an item that does nothing when you click on it. So let me save that. And now, if I trigger, and I'm pointed to the blue right now, and I still have flashing on, but now when I click on it, I don't get any spam in my chat log. I need to turn off that flashing because it's going to drive me crazy. So let me get rid of that. All right. There is one downside, though, of using an item for your quick slot, in that, as you see, when I hover over the image here, it's the tooltip that comes up is going to be the tooltip of the item, which is kind of annoying. And you see that tooltip is going to come up whenever I hover near the image, that's being displayed, which in this case, since I blew up the image, I expanded it, it's coming up all over the place. In fact, it's kind of hard to avoid. But if I reduce that to be more compact, like I originally had in the import file, then it shouldn't be much of an issue. So let me move this down here. If I move it down here as I originally had it, then it's not likely that I will hover over that accidentally, and so I won't have so many problems with the tooltip popping up. See, that's perhaps a little too small, but it makes it safer for hovering. Yeah, I won't get the gratuitous tooltip unless I move in that exact spot. So those are the main customizations that you would want to do. And that concludes part 4 of the video. Now I want to talk a little bit about the code. This particular alert, it has some Lua code extensions to it. An extension. Most of the alerts that I've created in the past have been codeless, in that they don't require any special Lua coding in order to pull off whatever behavior that I'm trying to accomplish. But this one is complex enough that I actually had to resort to using some Lua code. And the reason for that is I need to get the facing of the player and the player's X and Y coordinates, and then compare them to the X and Y coordinates of the braziers. And in order to demonstrate why or how that works and why that's necessary, I'm going to shift to another clip of a video that I made using a drawing program, and then I'll return to the instance here and continue discussing the code. Okay, so here is my crude representation of how this works. Using a drawing program, the triangle represents the player, the 4 circles represent potential brazier locations. As I move it around, you can see all 4 angles change. So now I'll start rotating the player's heading, and also while I do that, I'll start selecting which brazier is most aligned with where the player is facing. That can change just from moving position, even if the player doesn't change their heading. As you can see, it changed from green to blue without any rotation. Or you can rotate without moving, and that can also change the selection, in that case from blue to red. Obviously, if you do both, then it's likely to change. So hopefully that explains how it works from a geometric and trigonometric standpoint. So let's see how that's implemented in code. And I'll kind of step through methodically here. I'm initializing this variable called lowest diff to 360 for reasons. Then I'm initializing this table called brazier. The first level keys are the names of the colors, blue, green, red, yellow, and then the second level keys are X and Y for the X and Y coordinates. This color string here, I left that in, but it's not actually used. This was from an earlier iteration of this code. I've left it in there in case anybody wants to tinker with it. Now, there is a little bit of a quirk in the /lock command. There's even within the same instance, there can be 2 different variations of output for the /lock command, and I'll hop over to the trigger tab to help illustrate. This variation, this second pattern, is what you get if your character is facing true north. If you're facing true north, then it doesn't give you, the lock command doesn't give you a heading parameter. See, there's no H parameter. If you're not heading true north, then you get the H parameter followed by some numbers which tell you what your heading is. So there's two different potential patterns that could be matched here. Only one of them at any given time is going to be matched. If you come into this code and you only have two of the captures, meaning that there was no H parameter, then it just simply fills in the third parameter as 0. Then we get into the loop. The loop will go through the Brazier's table. It will calculate the offset between where the player is standing and where the brazier is located, the X and Y offsets. It will feed that into the arctangent math command, the math function, and I'm using the 2-argument variant of the arctangent function, which allows you to operate or to get a result that applies to all 4 quadrants in a plane. The single argument version of arctangent will only give you a result that applies to a single quadrant, but the 2 variant, which has been around since the 60s, I understand, although I've only recently become aware of it, will give you an arctangent, which could be in any of the 4 quadrants. Then that output of arctangent is assigned to the heading variable. Then I calculate the difference of the heading for that brazier versus the heading that the character is facing. And then I keep track of the lowest difference that I see. So the brazier which is closest to where the character is facing. And I capture that in the color picked variable. Then I feed back the color picked variable, which is the name of color, red, green, yellow, blue, into the index number 1 of the captures list. In the response part of the configuration, I then use that variable, which is referred to or referenced via %1 to select one of the image files. And if I look in my file system, again, drilling back down, in this case, I'm going to the resources directory, use cases, Thaurisgar. You see there's 4 different TGA files, which are image files, and the one that's selected is based on what the color is in the name of the file. So to summarize, recap, initialize the brazier table with XY coordinates, adjust for the true north scenario. For each of the braziers, loop through and compare that, derive the angle of the heading from where the character is standing to the brazier, then compare that to the facing heading of where the character is pointed. From that, determine which of the braziers is closest in heading to where the character is facing, populate the captures, the captures index number 1, and use that to select an image. So you have the different images, blue, yellow, red. All 3 of those are incorrect. Now let me face the actual brazier, and I get green. So hopefully that enlightens people who know about Lua coding to see how this technique can allow you to select a particular item that's at a fixed location and relative to where the player is standing and which direction the player is facing. So all of this is is obtainable. All of this information is obtainable. You can go through the LOTROinterface.com entry for GenOut, or there's. I'll probably post a separate import file on my author portal on LOTROinterface.com. But if not, it's actually contained in the 1.05 distribution of GenOut. So there it is. And hopefully someone finds this useful, and maybe they could tinker with it and extend it and improve it, in which case I'd love to see the output of that. And thank you for watching.